drugs come up, and I kind of went into my little diatribe on what frustrates me about the Republicans and Democrats and things that they're too close together on policy on. And one of them I brought up was the drug war, and I wish that there was a party that represented abolishing the drug war, ending drug prohibition is the way I like to frame it, because everyone realizes that prohibition did not work for alcohol. And now we're starting to realize prohibition didn't really work for weed either, for marijuana. And so, hey, can we go ahead and learn a couple of quick lessons here and just apply that to the rest of the drug world? All of them, point blank, end of story. Everything from caffeine to fentanyl, okay? Just end it. It's not bad. I mean, it's not good. It doesn't work. It creates more problems than it solves. It doesn't do much to limit consumption. Creates a whole new underclass of crime. And the drug war is a big one because the drug war is a double whammy. Number one, it's responsible for so much of the violent crime, whether it's people shooting each other over turf in downtown areas of many major metropolitan areas, or whether it's giving the cartels $60 billion worth of revenue every year so they can basically keep every state south of the Rio Grande a narco state and paid off. But also, when you put, a million of your own citizens in jail for nonviolent crimes, these are people that instead of sucking off 80-something thousand dollars, whatever it costs to house a prisoner every year, they could be out there working, being productive, not just paying into the tax system, but just contributing to the economy as a whole. And it's really tearing down some of the communities that seem to have their own specific complaints, like Black Lives Matter and whatnot. Democrats is, I want to end all the drug war, period. Everything's just legal. Even prescription drugs. There's no such thing as a prescription drug anymore. Everything's over the counter. You don't have to go get permission from some doctor who's licensed by the government. So he's basically a government agent to get permission for what you can and can't put in your body. My body, my choice. I don't need permission from anyone. Everyone's okay with that when it comes to whether or not to take a vaccine or have a vaccine mandate. Or conversely, if you're on the other side of the aisle, when someone wants to have an abortion, it's always my body, my choice. What about prescription drugs? Well, jeepers, James, I don't know if we can just let people have unfettered access to insulin and antibiotics, and there might be some kid that's vein in like black market boot and black tar the Cialis under the bridge downtown or something. Well, look, once you're steeped in my side of the ideas, you guys all sound like you're well intended, but I'm tired of having this conversation. So let's go through some of them because we're getting the expected pushback here on the drug war. So let's answer some of these questions. Where do we start here? Yeah, Jerry starts off with, in theory, your drug crap works, James. In theory, socialism works. The part left out of the theory is people. Well, I think that applies just as much to the drug war. You make it illegal, you make it hard to get, you put it behind. You make a doctor see you first and recommend it, and then you put it behind the glass at the pharmacy, and so only a pharmacist can give you those drugs. Well, who are the drugs that are killing more people? Is it the flat out illegal black market drugs that are killing more people, or did we get more deaths from people using the stuff that's behind the pharmacist counter? First thing you have to recognize is the drug war has failed. And there's no bigger statistic on the drug war has failed than last year. We broke the record, the all-time high in America for number of drug overdoses. So if we were trying to reduce it or minimize it, or I don't think anyone expects it to go down to zero, but whatever we're doing now, this is the worst solution that we've tried thus far. We didn't have drug prohibition until about 70 years ago. Ron Paul talks about it in his first job working at a drugstore. They would sell you laudanum over the counter. There was codeine. They would sell that over the counter. There was all kinds of stuff that your grandparents could just go to the store and buy. Hell, they had cocaine in the sodas. So that's like a philosophical argument, but let's look at some of these other questions. Anne asked, don't you think the use of drugs contributes to violent crimes? Somewhat, yes. There's some people out there who are committing violent crimes because they're drug users, but most of the violent crimes that are committed via the drug war are from the people who are operating the black market. It's the gangbangers who are shooting each other for territory, or because they got ripped off in a deal, or because he shorted them, or he's retaliation for some of those other ones. Most of the violence that comes from the drug world is precisely and only because it's illegal and only because it's created a black market. There are not gangs that like the Bloods and Crips in Los Angeles County are not shooting each other to get their cigarette territory. Cigarettes you can go buy them at the store. There's no need to fight for that territory. You want to sell cigarettes? Fine, go ahead. No one's killing each other. There's not one drive-by shooting where someone shoots up some 6-year-old's birthday party and a bunch of innocent people get hit because they couldn't get a pack of smokes or because they got ripped off on a carton of Marlboros. That only happens from the illegal drugs. Now, I'm not there. There are the people that are strung out, and so then they've got to go rob to feed their habit. And I'm not saying that's going to go away if you legalize drugs. There will still be that aspect, but that's the minority, overwhelming minority. And here's the bad news: that's never going to go away. And I'm not promising to get rid of drugs, and I'm not promising to get rid of addicts. And I'm not promising that I can keep your kids off drugs or your cousin or your mom and dad off drugs. There is no utopian end to my vision. I am just going to cut down the ugly parts that, just like when alcohol was illegal, that's what gave us, the mafia and Al Capone and all kinds of other violence that went away instantly because no one's killing each other over alcohol these days, but they were for the 15 or so years of prohibition, right? So that's my thought process. And just make no bones about it. I'm not saying my solution is going to get rid of our problems with drugs. It will get rid of some of our problems with drugs. It'll get rid of a lot of our problems with crime. But no, drugs, just like poor people, the war on drugs is a forever failure. It's one of these nice little statish tricks where, well, as soon as people stop using drugs, I guess we'll be able to wrap this up. This is just a war on drugs. Well, you're never going to win it. Just like you're never going to win the war on drugs, you're never going to win the war on poverty. Even the Bible tells you poor people are always going to be with us. And it doesn't matter what plans or what social programs you lay out there or how prosperous your society is. There's always going to be some people that are just dumb. There's going to be some people that are lazy. There's going to be some people that are mentally ill or just obstinate enough that they don't want to live by any rules. They would rather live under the bridge and, beg for money than have to live under, someone else's rules. The urban outdoor enthusiasts more than homeless is what they are now. But I'm not promising to get rid of poor people. I'm not promising to get rid of drugs. But there's no doubt in my mind that we would have less violence and crime in America concerning drugs if we legalized it. Well, then I said we also need to get rid of the income tax because Mike said flat tax. That's a whole nother one. He says it's not going to happen, no tax. Well, it did for the majority of this country. We didn't have an income tax. And I'm not saying no tax. I'm saying no income tax. The founding fathers specifically wrote in the Constitution, no income tax. And then the 16th Amendment undid that. And did that solve our problems, or do we have more debt now? Are we having a harder problem balancing our books now? Exactly. And it's not even really about an income tax. If you can just go randomly print $3 trillion in the span of the last 24 months, what are you even taxing us for? It's to control our behavior, and it's so they can get lobbyists to support them so they can write the rules in their favor. So, no, and you're not a realist. You wouldn't have to burn everything down for that. There's still many other avenues of tax revenue besides the income tax. There's sales tax, property tax, gas tax, custom tax, excise tax, and all the damn little fees I got to pay to get the paperwork just so I can drive my own car. Jessica brings up a very important point. How much money have we poured into the drug problem to no avail? Over $1 trillion. And you got to think, not only is that money, being wasted, that money could be better invested somewhere else and we would be getting gains on it instead. So there's opportunity cost. But something else I like to think about is I don't want the DEA to exist. I think it's a horrible agency, but I don't think the people that work there are horrible. They're probably really smart, intelligent, trustworthy, upstanding people. There's going to be some bad apples in any cart that's big. But those guys, instead of going and kicking down doors and busting up people for drugs, they would be out doing something productive in the private sector and contributing to this economy instead of taking away from it. They would be pushing the wagon instead of sitting in it. And how many people work for drug enforcement purposes? And it's not just the DEA, it's also customs, it's also the border people, but it's also all the cops that pull someone over and someone had a little bit of weed or someone had some meth or someone had some pills. And so now they've got to take the time to fill out the paperwork and they've got to book them and fingerprint them and put them in jail. And then you got to see them again. And they've got to go to court. And all of this could be tackling real crime that actually has victims. And so when we have like the case backlog, that would go away immediately. And when we have the officer shortages and we take away the thing that takes up probably if not the majority, the plurality of officer resources and manpower, we wouldn't have shortages of policemen in many of these major metropolitan areas immediately if you just get rid of the drug war. So that's another one. Um, Ann says, "Do we really have a drug war going on?" Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I said, what are we spending $1 trillion on? Let's see. Jessica asks, "What about all addictive prescription drugs?" Yes, make them all legal. Absolutely legal. The addictive prescription drugs are where we have the big problem now, and it's not working, is it? What we have going on now. See, most of those overdose deaths are from opioids, and most of that started with prescription drugs that were legal. Some of them go ahead and go all the way and OD or just ruin their life with regular old prescription drugs that they get legally, or were made legally and they are somehow sneaked out. But a lot of those people escalate to the black market for drugs, and that's where you get the ones that are tainted with fentanyl and the ones that are impure, and you're causing a whole ton of overdoses. If those people were not forced from going from legal opioids to the black market opioids, if they could just go to Walgreens and pick them up for cheap, there wouldn't be fentanyl overdoses. Prince is one of those cases. He wouldn't have had a fentanyl overdose because he wouldn't have had his little opioids tainted. There wouldn't be no shortcuts. And why? Because, well, geez, Johnson and Johnson doesn't want the fentanyl lawsuit, and it's made in a factory where no one's going to have to slip it in there. That's someone would actually go to jail for that.